Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Hakeemah Cummings, and I am the Outreach and Partnerships Coordinator for ACC. And today is International Women's Day. So today we're going to be having a conversation with three other sisters in support of our Fund Her Future campaign, which is all about offering interest-free loans to women from certain demographics, widowed, victims of domestic violence and divorce. So it's a very pertinent conversation to have on International Women's Day. So I'm going to be adding in our guest today. Here comes Lisa Vogl. Hey, Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
I'm doing well. And here comes Nimzi Unmeasured. I'm so excited for this conversation.
And
MashaAllah. Hey, Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, let's see if Modestly
Do you guys
Cupcake
need to
is
put my
here
headphones in,
yet.
or is the audio okay?
I think your audio is fine.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Nice to meet you. It's Naimah, right? Do I pronounce it
Yes.
Naimah? Okay.
Yes, you did.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'm just trying to add in Modestly Cupcake here. There we go.
I'm so excited. Oh, she's here. She just said. I'm so excited for this feature.
Okay. Yes, me too. Me too. Let's make sure everyone's in. There we go. MashaAllah.
Okay, we did it.
Assalamualaikum, ladies. I'm so excited to talk to all three of you. All four of us can talk in this new feature of Instagram. Like, this is revolutionary.
I don't know why it took them so long to do this. Like,
it seems like something that should have been there from the beginning, but alhamdulillah, this is really great. So I'm going to do a short introduction of each one of you, but of course you're going to be adding in, details that if you'd like to. So we have Lisa Vogl up on top here with me. She is the owner and founder of Verona Collection, co-founder as well. And she can introduce herself and tell you guys a little bit about who she is.
Well, co-founder of Verona Collection. I always like to add co because I can never leave out, my girl who founded it with me. I, get a lot of the attention or whatever, but she's the founder too. I'm a single mother of two. I am a advocate against domestic violence. So those who follow me, something that is my passion. So I don't know what else to add to that. I'm a convert of Islam.
Yeah, that's great. So for the subject that we're talking about today, I thought it was just really powerful to have you on board because of your advocacy against domestic violence. And today we're talking about the subject of International Women's Day, which is Choose to Challenge. And the challenging of society against, pushing back against domestic violence is definitely something that you're known for and that you have made a lot of changes for. So thank you for that. And then at the bottom in the red hijab, we have Vanessa Cañas, and her brand is called Modestly Cupcake. So please go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
It's purple. It's magenta.
Is it purple? To me, it looks a little red. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So yes, I'm Vanessa Cañas. I am a Latina convert to Islam and a single mother as well, a DV survivor and advocate. And yeah, I'm a fashion designer and owner of Modestly Cupcake.
MashaAllah. So we know each other from your brand, but also because we had a conversation via Verona Collection's advocacy for domestic violence back in October. So that was a very, very meaningful conversation. And thank you so much for that. Like, you really opened up and continue to use your voice to change things.
No, thank you for having me and, giving me that, platform. It was amazing.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, and then we have Naimah. She is a mother, she is an author. So go ahead and tell people about what you do as well.
Yes, assalamu alaikum everyone. So my name is Naimah, and as you mentioned, I'm an author. I'm a mother of two boys, a single mother, And I work full-time as a certified medical auditor and specialist. And I also, on the side, during my free time, I teach workshops to people to learn how to cook and garden. Like I like to say, I teach ancient sciences, things that are kind of going out of style. But yeah, that's a basic overview.
Yeah, and you're also a poet. So we hosted one of your videos here at ACC at the end of Black History Month, and that was a beautiful poem. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Mashallah. Okay, so let's dive into this discussion. So again, just to introduce the topic, today is International Women's Day. The kind of theme of International Women's Day for 2021 is choose to challenge. And so it's all about women kind of challenging societal norms or things that kind of put us into a box or expectations that are not feasible or that we don't necessarily want to comply to. So it's all about women kind of choosing to challenge those societal norms and make changes. And it's all, again, for the Fund Her Future campaign. So it's in support of that campaign. And that campaign is interest-free loans for students who are women who've just been divorced, or they are victims of domestic violence or survivors of domestic violence, or widows. So those are demographics that need extra support. So ACC does provide that support in terms of interest-free student loans. Okay. So the first question I want to ask you, Lisa, is so you went through a divorce, and during that divorce you had endured domestic violence. After the divorce, and I'm not sure exactly what the timeline was, but you also decided to open up Verona Collection, and Verona Collections became a huge platform. I mean, mashallah, a big brand here in America. And then after that, you decided to go public with your story of domestic violence. Can you tell us why you decided to go public, kind of using your platform and the public image that you have now as Lisa Vogl of Verona Collection?
Well, I mean, I stayed quiet for years. Like I had actually like been out of the marriage for I think like a full 2 years before I even like said a word to other than his family knew, his close family, like a lot knew. She actually helped, I would go to her home, you know what I mean, when I'd have to escape sometimes. So she was very aware of what was going on, her and her husband. And then I had even kept it from my own family for like probably 6 months until, after I left. So it wasn't until I decided to go public for, 2 years afterwards. But the reason why I chose to, and I went back and forth and I contemplated, do I speak out? Do I speak out? Because one of the things that I was trying to hold back on is my biggest fear was reiterating a stereotype of Muslim men being abusive. You know what I mean? That was my biggest fear. Do I reiterate the stereotype? Because that's the reality of people will try to pin that. But so every time I talk about domestic violence, I'm like, yes, I talk about it in relation a little bit more to the Muslim community, but it happens just as much. 1 in 3 women in America, sometimes statistics are 1 in 4, will at some point be victims of abuse. That's a really horrible statistic. So that held me back from speaking out because I didn't want to reiterate a stereotype. But I decided to speak out because, like, alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, like, I was put on, like, all these interviews everywhere, from CNN to, like, God knows there wasn't an interview that didn't get thrown in my face when the Macy's launched, This is not just a right to speak out. It had a responsibility at that point. I was like, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving me a platform, I have to use it for good. So that's really what drove me to speak out, because I felt that if Allah is giving these opportunities, you have a choice on how you're going to use it.
Yeah. And that use of your platform as like a place where you advocate for people's rights and you speak out about things that are unfair and violent, honestly, not just unfair.
Oppression.
That's something, yeah. I mean, I think it's something that a lot of people have not kind of used their platform for. So I just want to commend you, because you could have kept that story outside of the public eye. you know, but that responsibility that you absorbed, it changes a lot. It changes a lot when you use your voice. So mashallah, thank you for doing that and for continuing to do it. And then Vanessa, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your story, because I think Lisa's is, again, she was interviewed by so many public platforms, and I think that there's stories very similar to hers that are not as widely spread. So can you give us a little bit more about your story as well?
Right. So when I became Muslim, like most converts, I was marketed the, you know, get married quick scheme. So I married another Latino convert that was much older than I was. And I have to stress that because, like Lisa said, DV is seen in all cultures and all backgrounds. But, you know, it was absolute misery. And I didn't know how to stand on my own 2 feet as a woman in a relationship. So I didn't know how to be in a relationship. So I didn't know what to expect or what was normal, what wasn't. The abuse started very early. I didn't recognize what it was. So it started off, you know, in the form of control and accusations. It escalated to, you know, physical, financial, spiritual, just pretty much everything in the book. And I stayed because I thought, you know, that's what good Muslim women did. That's what good wives did. They, you know, they stayed, they worked on their marriage at the compromise of, you know, my happiness, you know, my freedom, my voice, everything. So when I finally broke free of that horrible situation, I was, you know, very fortunate to have my mother to support me. You know, she had my back, but not everyone is fortunate to have, you know, that support system. I was very fortunate to have her to fall back on. You know, having her there gave me the reassurance to leave, you know, without thinking that I'd be at risk at, you know, being in the street with my son and have no security. And that's pretty much how I got out and what happened with me.
Yeah. We actually had a really great conversation, and I alluded to it earlier on, via the Verona page back in October, and I think that IGTV is still there. So if anybody wants to, is it still there?
No, it's not there anymore.
It's not there? Oh no. So it was a really, really great conversation. Because not only did you talk about your story, but you also talked about the aftermath in a positive way as well, like how you pulled yourself out of it and what resources you were able to access, and your brand, you know, like how your brand, like it exudes so much happiness, and it's not to in any erasure of anything that you've endured, but it's to show that there is another side as well. And it's the same woman, you know, mashallah, it was really great. I also wanted to ask Lisa, Vanessa mentioned that that there was this stereotype of be the good Muslim wife and, you know, just do the things good women do. Did you also have that same experience as you know, you guys are both reverts?
I mean, there was definitely more of a pressure to stay silent and be patient, you know what I mean? And I think one of the biggest things that in my mind is that I don't want to break up a family. That was the biggest element as to why I stayed. I'm like, do I want, you know, to have my children, you know, in a divorced family? Like, I come from a divorce. Do I want to have that life? But like what I keep speaking out against is that the woman is not breaking up a family. The family is already broken. There is no family when there's an abuse. That's the reality of it. There is no family. The family is broken. And if I stayed, I would be doing a disservice to the children. I am leaving for the children, not doing it to the children. So that's where I had to actually change my mentality because I was brainwashed. The first thing that I said when I got to, and I'm vocal about who helped me now, Arthur Richards, mashallah, may Allah protect him and his wife. You know, they took me in immediately. And I sat there at the breakfast table the next day when I finally arrived, and I was like, I broke up a family. And he was like, you didn't break up a family. His fist broke up a family. So it's changing that mentality of recognizing that this is not something we are supposed to endure. We are supposed to break the cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
there's always like this guilt that comes with it. Like, oh, I'm the bad person. I'm doing the wrong thing. And you know, it's a blame game. Like you're constantly blaming yourself for doing, you know, keeping yourself safe and keeping your children safe and removing yourself from a situation that you're not that you should not be in, you know, that you're worthy of so much more. And, you know, you kind of just it doesn't click right away.
Yeah. Naimah, I wanted to ask you, so what we received here at ACC, a message from you, and it was really, really powerful, even just a statement, just saying that, you know, I see this campaign, the Fund Her Future campaign, and I want to reach out and support. And then here you are, you know, on our live, you know, willing to talk to us about these things. So what about the Fund Her Future campaign moved you to want to support it?
Right. Well, firstly, I'm always impressed by a continuous charity. Like every time I see their campaigns, every time I see their fundraising, I'm always impressed and I'm always moved by it. But this particular campaign, just like the second I saw it, I was like, let me donate and let me send a message because I want to help bring awareness to this. Because I think that particularly, I know we're talking about divorced women and widowed women, but particularly divorced women, they are, you know, kind of looked down, especially in the Muslim community. And like the difference is like maybe a divorced woman and a widowed woman, they're both single mothers. Widowed women get a support that divorced women don't get. The second that their husband dies, there might be a GoFundMe, there might be a meal train, there might be a this and then that. For divorced women, when you get divorced, it's like, well, did you try everything? You know, could you be patient? You know, this or that. The support that's offered to divorced women is much less. And they often have the trauma of kind of trying to figure out what went wrong. And then they have the additional trauma of like the community looking down on them and them trying to get on their own 2 feet. I'm in a unique position in that I do, alhamdulillah, like I do have a great support system and I have a career in which I can support myself. And so I wanted to use that privilege to leverage it to try to help, you know, another woman not have to deal with, you know, figuring things out for her kids, dealing with the emotional burden, trying to recover from the trauma, and, you know, try to get her an education so that she could build herself up without having to be reliant. It's very humiliating to try to ask somebody else for help and to try to kind of, you know, have a more dignified outlet for these women to get an education and get on their own 2 feet and build themselves up, especially as a single mother.
Yeah. Vanessa, did you have something to add?
No, I was agreeing with everything that you were saying. Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, it's so true. And I myself, I'm not a divorced woman, but I am, you know, I have people that I know who have gone through divorce. And it is very, very true. It is, I mean, this was the first time when I saw the Fund for Her Future campaign back a couple months ago before I started working for ACC. It was like a light bulb turned on in my brain because here was a demographic of people that I don't think has ever been spoken to and supported and just reached out, not the women having to reach out like, oh, I'm divorced, you know, like what you said, like there's a level of like, you're not as dignified if you have to ask, you know.
Right.
It's not that you actually are undignified, but it feels like it's an undignified process to ask people for help. But here's a program where it's like, here's the help. Here's the help, because we know, we recognize you and we want to bring you that dignity to this process. And that's beautiful. I love that. Mashallah. Go ahead.
Can I, like, I think that's amazing when there's someone like you that may not have experienced what we did, but you fight for it just as much. I think that's what it takes. Is the community doesn't, you shouldn't have to have experienced to understand that this is the problem. I'm going to do my part to make change. And so someone like you is amazing, mashallah, that is going to be fighting for this as much as someone like me who's been through it.
Yeah, right. I mean, and you know what? It's because nobody knows what the future holds. Nobody knows what the future holds. And it might not be my future, but I have sisters. I have, I have best friends. And in 1 year's time, look at how much has changed just from 2019 March to, I'm sorry, 2020 March to
Yes.
2021 March. So many things have changed for so many people. And so just because it's not my own lived experience doesn't mean it can't become personal to me. Because as an ummah, I just feel like if part of it is not healing or is not catered to or is hurting, then all of us should really be hurting in some way.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I wanted to go on and ask Lisa. So the theme again of International Women's Day today is choose to challenge. And so with challenge, so there's a quote here that says, "A challenged world is an alert world, and from challenge comes change." So let us into your mind as to like, how do you think what do you think is the link between challenge and change?
Okay, I think that the biggest thing in the link is that for me personally is that like how do I answer this? One of the biggest things that we need to challenge ourselves as far as when it comes to Women's Day is that we need to be heard. Our voices need to be heard. That's where change needs to occur. Is that we need to stop being silenced, because that's how, when your voices are heard, is when the change starts to occur. But for me, when I thinking about the link between the two, I would have to say that I don't think that I decided to finally speak out until I was pushed against the wall and I was like, I could not be silent any longer. That the challenge was so great, it was such a problem that it was like, this is like, there's no other option but to speak out. And so that's what I think of when I hear the two of if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm making
it does make sense. Oftentimes when you challenge societal expectations or just like normative ways of people behaving in society, and someone uses their voice, like you said, your back was against the wall and you chose to challenge that. And that's exactly, what this day is about, challenging this.
Most people won't. Not everyone's going to like it. You're going to get a lot of pushback. And that's the problem, that like all the more reason why we need to speak. Because clearly issue. Clearly we need to be using our voices and make people think and realize that, it's change has got to come, in the way we silence women, the way we, victim blame them, the way we don't support them. So
has Naimah or Vanessa, have you guys had any circumstances where you have challenged something, and then actually saw a change come about, thereafter? You spoke up about something and, maybe you got some feedback from someone who heard your message. You used your voice and then, something changed.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to this conversation that we're having now, I had a situation in which I was working with somebody, and I felt that they were, quite frankly, dropping the ball on the way they were like assessing their clients in terms of like providing help for them. And so I told them in a very private manner that I think that they need to assess, like, just like when you go to a hospital, you might come in there for a broken arm, they're going to assess you for domestic violence, they're going to assess you for sexual abuse, they're going to assess you for all these other things. And so I just I spoke to them and I said, listen, I think that in your assessments you need to ask more questions related to whether or not there's abuse going on, and so on and so forth, because honestly, when we're trying to help people, we need to have the best picture like as possible. And that means we want a wide range shot, not necessarily a zoomed in focus. And so after I brought that to the person's attention, they then changed the way they did things. And to that point, they also included community education, which for me was the most moving part about it, because when you're dealing with individual clients, that's one person, but when you're educating a community, that's really groundbreaking. And so for me, I think, like Lisa mentioned, when you speak up, people might not want to hear it, The reality is that not talking about it doesn't mean that we don't have these problems.
Right.
And when we speak up about things like this, we're not breaking up families, because women know if they're going to stay or not. And there are many women that are in abusive situations and they don't necessarily want to leave, and they don't have to if the safety of life is not an issue. But what we can do is educate people and strengthen them in their core, strengthen their self-esteem to then show up better for themselves and for the families that they're raising. Because broken women have a hard time raising children with high self-esteem. And that's just the reality of the situation. The more we educate and empower, we're not necessarily seeking to break up any family. That's for the individual to decide on their own. But what we can do, like I said, is to build up these women. And by building up these women, we are building and strengthening our society. And who doesn't need that? The Ummah needs that.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's very powerful. Speaking of that, the next question is for you, Vanessa. So oftentimes we hear, women are the weaker sex, or, like men are stronger, whether that's mentally strong or physically strong or whatever. We have this narrative of being gentler or weaker, etc. But what are some strengths that you have as a woman that make you more capable of doing things like challenging societal norms? What are those things that you come, like your perspective as a woman enables you to do those things?
Okay, so this is an excellent question because I do have a teenage son who is growing way too quickly. So most people don't know this about me, but I was actually a single teen mom. I'm 30 and my son will be 16 in a few months. So when it comes to social, and economic disparities women face in this world, I'm definitely no stranger to them. So the first strength any woman, in my opinion, can achieve, and the strength that I feel that, I have in creating social justice in this world for women, is recognizing what movements cause more damage than harm. We may be involved in, learn to say, I'm wrong, this is no friend to womankind, let me correct myself because I want the progress of women and not the continuation of her subjugation. And then be vocal about it. So this is the most difficult thing for any human being to do, to admit, hey, wait, I'm in something that, probably isn't the right thing. Maybe I should, change, and admit that I was, doing the wrong thing. That's so difficult to do. But I think that it becomes a true strength, when mastered. So, while I understand there are definitely movements out there that promote the empowerment, of women by making them, solely, sexual beings and things like that, it's incumbent upon me as a woman to show you the secondary effects of that medicine being prescribed, because I was, every day I wake up and my reality was shaped by that ideology. So in my opinion, I think that we need to be careful and take responsibility what is within our own society that can affect our young girls and boys for the rest of their lives. Not solely blame, parents for the roles that we also play, in the visibility and promotion of these movements. So I'm personally very involved in my son's life. He's homeschooled even before pandemic. So I've tried, really hard to make sure that he's on point, but sometimes some things get through, it's just, there's so much in the world right now. So raising children, I feel like it's a social effort. And, while I take responsibility for, what I teach him, I own up, for my mistakes as a human being, the mistakes that I've made. So like when a woman becomes a mother or even becomes pregnant, she carries that responsibility alone and no one is carrying it for her. So when you have society influencing impressionable minds in a haphazard manner, that's when, that responsibility becomes like you're fighting a war. especially for a single mother. And, you know, I've said it before, motherhood is a pause button, you know, on a woman's life. There are a lot of things in this world that, you know, I see as a woman today who was affected by them at a young age and, you know, continues to be affected by them today. With an excellent mother, you know, I had a great mother at home, you know, these things are, you know, things that are truly frightening for me and the future of our youth. So I believe that, you know, strength lies in recognizing when to put, you know, your foot down and say, no, this is wrong. And I'm going to speak up against this. This is wrong. Even if you've, you know, been involved in the past, it's good to, you know, just have that sense of, you know, humility and say, I need to step up and be wrong. And that's where I come from.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the points you made there is definitely like that motherhood, you know, like we're talking about the strengths that as women we can bring to the table instead of always thinking about, you know, oh, we're the weaker sex or we're behind every great man is actually his mother who raised him. So
Right. Yeah.
so so I mean we're all mothers here. I have two daughters. Lisa, you have two sons. Vanessa, you have one son.
I have one teenage son.
And then Naima, you have two sons too. So you're
Yes.
all boy moms. I'm the only girl
Yes.
here. So that leads to the next question, which is for Naima, but feel free, Lisa and Vanessa, because you guys are mothers of sons. But Naima, I wanted to ask you, like, as a mother of sons, like, how are you choosing to challenge again, like this notion of like what society expects out of women, what society expects out of men, and how are you raising men who are going to be different, you know, than what society expects?
Yeah. You know, this question for me is like very powerful. I'll share this when when I got pregnant, both of my pregnancies, I didn't find out the sex of my kids. And so it's kind of like, I'm going to wait and figure it out. But, you know, deep in my heart, I was hoping like, oh, I really want a daughter. I can teach my daughter how to bake, how to cook, how to do this. And then boom, I got a son. And then next pregnancy, I'm like, you know, I hope I get my girl. And then boom, I got a son. And, you know, Allah gives you what you need and not necessarily what you want. And so I said, man, like Allah, you gave me these two sons, and like I wish you gave me 100 sons so I can raise them into men.
Wow.
Because when I look at the quality of men in our society, it's dwindling at a very fast rate. And for me, I think, and for every individual, our first and most important thing as Muslims is to fulfill our responsibility. And that means to worship Allah and then do what He asks us to do. So, me as a mother, when I think about the responsibility that I have to raise my sons into men that are strong, into men that are gentle, into men that are warriors and loving and kings and also servants, servants of society. And that means that I have to put my everything into raising good men, because one day, inshallah, they're going to become husbands. And I think to myself, I don't know why, but the verse in the Quran that says, like, basically, if you save one, it's as if you saved all of humanity. And I think that, you know, if I raise my sons into men that don't break women, it'll be as if they saved all of humanity.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was
Powerful.
powerful stuff. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and even like, you know, mashallah, I'm still absorbing what you raising boys that turn into men that don't break women. I mean, just subhanallah, that's actually very, very powerful. And with parenting, of course, like I said, I don't have sons, but with parenting, it's literally in every interaction that you have with your children that you're raising them. It's not just in the quote unquote teachable moments, you know? It's how you're moving in your day. You know, it's the subtleties, and then there's the overt, like, you know, don't do that, do this. But then there's also just the example of who you are, what you speak about. My kids are constantly watching my own content. Like, Mom, can I go on your Instagram and watch your IGTVs? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. I mean, this should be content that is something I'm proud to show them. and I should be able to pull them into my experience and not have a single sense of shame, because I am their example in every single way. It's not just, this public social media image that you're portraying. Like, what's actually transformative is how you're raising the next generation. And Vanessa, you mentioned in the last question, you mentioned something about education, and how, like, right now, one of my biggest struggles with my children is their education, because when I am only I'm when I'm the one kind of like teaching them their next lesson, then I can really rely on myself. Like, I'm going to teach them the truth. I'm going to be well-rounded in my approach to history. I'm going to teach them the things that matter. But when I open these curricula that are given to me online, and when another teacher comes in their virtual little session and she's teaching them things, it's always off. It's always just a little off. I'm like, these things, what you're teaching them does not matter. What you're teaching my child about Valentine's Day, that doesn't matter. Have you mentioned Black History Month yet? That's what actually matters. Valentine's Day has nothing to do with my children.
Right.
I mean, to be very honest, and that's my perspective as a mother. And so what people think is just play and, just, oh, we're just coloring hearts today. No, I see that as these are subliminal messages that you're sending to my child, where we are emphasizing things that don't matter to them and ignoring things that should. So that those points are very, very, very powerful to me. Lisa, did you have anything else to add, or anything to add about the motherhood for boys?
No, I think, mashallah, she was so on point in everything she said. I think that when it comes to boys, like, my biggest thing when raising them is, like, one of the most important things to me is them understanding their emotions. I think and I know this is Women's Day, but I know, so I don't want to go too much on topic on men, but, like, I think men are taught to, like, have a very twisted reality as to what masculinity is, and they are told to just suck it up and not cry, and I think that actually it plays out their aggression and not knowing how to handle their emotions in a healthy way when they're angry, and it's okay to be angry, but we don't act out like this. So it's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. I talk about them now, like, getting them to understand their own emotions. So when they become husbands, they have that ability to communicate with their wife about, what's hurting them, why they're sad, why they're angry. So they don't repeat the behavior of their, my biggest mission in life, that is my biggest mission in life, make sure that my sons grow up to treat women well. If I have done that, then I feel like I've done my job. I've broken a cycle. So biggest thing when raising sons.
Yeah. And you're doing a really good job. And I just want to, sometimes as women,
you can hear them in the background. They're very
I know that they have a lot of, like,
they have a lot of energy.
Right.
But
a lot of times as women, we need to say those things to each other. We need to say, like, you're doing a good job as a mom.
Yeah.
We need that messaging, and it can't just always be subtle. Like, we have to say those words to each other.
I do my best.
So the next question is that, okay, again, going back to ACC and our Fund Her Future campaign. So we're offering interest-free student loans to women who are widowed or divorced, and a lot of people from the divorced category are also survivors of domestic violence. So what has been your experience with accessing higher education, and how has that impacted your ability to thrive post-divorce?
Who's that question for? Was that for me? I was looking at the comments. Assalamu alaikum, Jadine. I would say actually that is one of the biggest, like, alhamdulillah, like, I have a bachelor's degree. I went to a private institution, very expensive. I was very fortunate where a lot of my education was on scholarship. So I got very lucky. However, because it was such an expensive school, it was like the cost of Harvard, essentially. I still have major debt. Like, I still, to this day, it's the one debt that I, like, need to, like, knock out. And it's holding me back, where I'm like, it's over my head financially that I have to figure it out. And I have this interest now as a Muslim. I wasn't a Muslim when I went to college. So I'm in this predicament. What do I do? Do I just pay it and I'm having to pay interest, right? So a program like ACC, mashallah, if I had only known about or had this program at my fingertips when I was in college, which was like gazillion years ago, you know what I mean? Like it would have solved the problem that I had now, you know, of tackling this debt. That's one, just the access to it. But as far as education, like, alhamdulillah, like, it's so important. You know, one of the things that my father would always say, may God rest his soul, is that education is the one thing, and knowledge is that no one can take from you. They can take everything from you, but they can't take your education. So it is thing that I think is the most powerful tool, you know, as far as succeeding in life and being able to, you know, move forward. So I think it's the most important tool we can give ourselves is knowledge and education. And if we have programs like ACC that is able to, you know, invest in our communities, that is just the best way that we can move forward.
Yeah. And it reminds me actually of a point that Naimah brought up earlier, you know, that if you change one person, you change all of mankind. And I think that's an ayah or maybe it's a hadith, but with education is how you can actually change things, right? And like when we're raising children or even ourselves, you know, when we come upon some knowledge that we didn't know before, and it actually, just like how I said, like when I heard of this Fund Her Future campaign before I was working for ACC, a light bulb went off in my brain, and here I am, like now I'm working for ACC, and now I'm having this conversation. Like it has really changed and widened my view of like who Muslim organizations and, you know, how Muslims can actually lead conversations about, you know, advocacy and support. And that's through educating me. Like I was unaware of, you know, the need of these programs for this demographic. So that's education. And of course, for student loans, you're going to universities, you're going to get your PhD and your MA and your, you know, your master's in business. I mean, these are empowering things where you can actually establish financial security for the next generation. I mean, there's really no end to this. And the reason why ACC is called a continuous charity is because of that idea that when you give towards someone's education, there's really no end to the blessings that you can reap thereafter. You know, so after, even beyond the grave, you can continue to reap the benefits of educating someone else. So, mashallah. So we have some last two questions here. So Vanessa, so there's a quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she said, "Women belong in all spaces where decisions are being made." So what kind of a unique perspective do you think that women can bring to the table, and why is it necessary to have us included?
You gave me the hardest question.
I'm sorry. Feel free to piggyback. We can all kind of answer this question.
Okay, so I believe that, you know, men and women have distinguishable qualities. So I believe that we complement each other rather than constantly be in competition with each other. I think that our strengths lie in working together. Yeah. Women are nurturing, compassionate, considerate of the small details that go, you know, the extra mile. It's things like, you know, the small details that make all the difference in anyone's life. I also believe that this consideration stems from not having certain privileges in society. You know, when someone is oppressed in any way, it becomes a gateway of understanding on how to keep injustices from reoccurring. So it's a fresh perspective. So I definitely think that it brings, you know, balance and insight, and in a, you know, just get it done world. I don't think that it's healthy for, you know, sexes to break away from each other in their own groups. I think that we have to be each other's support and voice of reason. It goes both ways. You know, finding that sweet spot of understanding is difficult, but, you know, I think it's necessary for a healthy future. Definitely. And that's where, you know, that's where I come from.
Yeah. I mean, that was a perfect response. Definitely we need each other. I mean, Allah created us in pairs. It's not because we, one of the problems I think with kind of maybe the movement behind women speaking up and women being more, vocal, is that people think that it's just women trying to, become more like men. No, it's just women stepping into their truth and actually inviting men to step into their actual truth too, because the society is run by both of us,
Right.
so it's not really a one-sided discussion, and that's why we talked about raising men and how you guys are, raising sons, because you have to have both, there and present at the table. Um, and there was something that you said reminded me of, I believe it was Lisa who mentioned um, raising boys who are emotionally like self-aware,
Yeah.
because a lot of times women are thought of as the emotional ones, and
Mhm.
men are just as emotional, but it can be different emotions.
Actually, they're more emotional.
Real.
They're more like, studies
Yeah,
are saying that men are actually more emotional than women.
yeah.
So it's
It's
something.
just emotions in different ways or expressed differently. And each individual man can be very emotionally different than any other man. Like, what are all these blanket statements?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that being more involved in how we raise our sons, in not suppressing, their
Okay.
feelings.
Cry. It is
It's okay. It's okay to cry. It doesn't make you any less of a man.
right.
That's what I'm trying. It doesn't make you any less of a man, any less of a human to, shed a tear. It doesn't take away from your manhood. We have like this constant manhood versus malehood, I don't know, jumbly, whatever the heck, in our
Yeah,
society.
yeah,
uh, so yeah, just being very involved and very vocal with our boys. I feel like we give a lot of girls a lot of emphasis
yeah.
on, and room and space to express themselves, but boys
Hmm.
kind of just like, shut up, don't cry.
Yeah,
Don't be that, don't be a wimp, don't be this, don't be that. So I think it's very
yeah,
important for us to be very involved in their lives, in that regard.
One
yeah.
of,
So we
one
act,
oh, I'm
oh,
sorry.
go ahead. No, no, go, Lisa.
And that, like, one of the things that I do now is every single day I actually ask them, I'm like, give me 3 things that you're great at, 3 things that you're thankful for. So one of the things I always ask them about, because I want them to have self-love, and if they have self-love and self-confidence, that I always say broken people, break others, just like what
Hmm.
I don't want them to go and break women. So they
Yeah.
have to feel whole. They have to feel good
Hmm.
about themselves and self-confident and love themselves, so then they can go on and treat women with that same love and respect, because if they're broken, they're going to try to break others. So before every day when I go to school, I'm like, I want you to tell me 3 things that you love about yourself, because I want them to be, constantly loving themselves just as much as they show love to others.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. We actually have some questions that we have 2 questions some people submitted. I'll display them on the screen and you guys can choose if you want to answer it. Of course, these are the questions that we knew of beforehand. So it says, why do you think gender inequality is still a topic of debate for debate in the 21st century?
I'll start.
Okay, go
Um,
ahead.
Loaded.
I think that these are issues of the human condition,
Hmm.
and I don't think that it's ever going to go away. And I don't necessarily think that it should. Like, we think that, problems are like a generational issue, and I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think one of the reasons why the Quran is timeless is because the human condition is timeless and it's repetitive. And so we will always have these issues. And that means that there's always opportunities for us to stand up and speak out against oppression. That means that there's an opportunity for a leader to be present, because if we're all like doing the same thing and we're all in check, there's no opportunity to kind of sift, I guess, to sift the good and the bad. And so these issues will be cyclical, and they will come back over and over and over, and it is our job as men and women of society to stand up and speak up and use that opportunity to say enough.
Hmm.
Perfectly stated. And this question reminded me of, like, why people, you know, people are asking the same question about not just gender inequality, but race inequality as well. Why are we even still talking about racism? You know, because it is a human condition issue, exactly what Naimah said. The same statements that are being said right now against the oppression, you know, due to race, are the same statements that were repeated, you know, 60 years ago, 80 years ago, and were said before that and written in, you know, authored in books. People have been saying the same things over and over, and pretty much nothing changes. It just looks, it can look different, but the actual soul of people have not changed. You know, and so that's why we have to try to make these changes generational. We have to teach the children about these things, and then when they grow up, they might, you know, be raising another generation that maybe we don't have to talk about these things as much anymore.
I also think that teaching correct history, like I think people downplay how important history is, you know, in teaching it to our children. Everything repeats itself over and over, like you said. Like my son and I, we love this cartoon, and it has like the wisest things. So there was this one episode where, you know, one particular individual lived for like 1,000 years, and they were asked, you know, what did you learn living 1,000 years? And she said that, you know, everything repeats itself, because everything repeats itself, and nobody learns anything because nobody lives long enough to tell the tale.
Yeah.
So it's true. It's like we live such a short period of time, and so much has happened in the past that we just don't communicate it. We don't have the opportunity to communicate it. So that's like so important. We downplay history so much.
Yeah. History is very, very, very important. The second question is here. Challenging misconceptions of being overly emotional just because I express myself. So I guess it's more so a comment than a question. Yeah, when women do express ourselves, and sometimes we express it in the way that it means to be expressed, with anger, with frustration, with words that, you know, are not politically correct or whatever it is. Oftentimes it's just, oh, you're overly emotional. And it's very dismissive. And I think that women are becoming very, you know, just dismissive of that. Like, you know, I don't care if you say I'm overly emotional or whatever it is, it needs to be said. And it needs to be said with a certain level of.
With someone the other day about this. Sorry to interrupt you. That's literally up, and I was like, you know what? You can call me emotional, but my feelings are valid. And they had no response to it. I'm like, because what I'm talking to you about is valid, and you are trying to pin it on me. I literally had this conversation with someone the other day about it. So I think it's exactly what, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize, but it's it's so, because like when you're speaking up, it's like that's the way to silence women. You're just, you know, you're just being emotional. You're just dramatic. You know what I mean? But the actual issue is never addressed. So I think that that's just the most way, a way of silencing women.
Yeah. I mean, and essentially it's called gaslighting. Like, you know, whenever someone speaks up for, you know, their oppressed state, or someone taking away rights from them, or whatever it is, there's gonna be a subset of people that's gonna tell that person it was your fault, or, you know, like, why didn't you? And, you know, try to silence them. And it's really hard sometimes to drown that out. But you have to persist. You have to persist. So final question, unless there's anything else that needs to be said. This has been amazing, by the way. Naimah, so to to close this out, what is one of your favorite stories from Islamic history that shows that women's issues are important and that societal standards need to be challenged?
Okay, so you know, for me, especially like as a writer, everything that involves women, to me, it's like something like it's gonna, like, you know, pique my interest, right? Because I can relate. So I think it's either like a learning opportunity or something like to learn what not to do, or to get an example of like, okay, this is how we should be when I look at the Sunnah. But in relation to this conversation in particular, one story that really, really kind of stands out and speaks to me is this story where this woman went to the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. She went to the messenger and she said, you know, I want to get a divorce from my husband. And she said, you know, his deen is good, his religion is good, and his manners are good. but I just can't be with him anymore. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, well, did he give you a mahar? Like, did he give you a wedding gift? And she said, yes, he gave me a garden. And so he said to her, okay, return the garden. He spoke to her husband. He said, basically, she returned her wedding gift, which was the garden, and in exchange, she got divorced from her husband. And so the reason why I picked this story is because, first of all, the woman said that her husband had good manners and that, you know, he was good in his practicing of the religion. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't say to her, he's a good Muslim, he has good manners, what's your problem? Go back. And so I think that oftentimes, and before I even get to the point that I want to make, is that the Prophet ﷺ gave her the time of day, right? She's saying, like, my husband is a great man, I can't be with him anymore. And he didn't dismiss her. And so the point that I want to drive home here is that women don't have to be survivors of abuse to deserve being listened to. And so that's why I tried not to pick a story where we have, like, you know, a power differential and, you know, oppression, accusations, and this and that. You can have a good normal guy and a good normal girl that are not violating each other's rights, and they still deserve to be listened to, and they should still have agency for what they want to do in their own relationship with each other. And so in regards to this campaign, when we talk about raising money for divorced women, these are women that are already divorced. They're not in a marriage anymore. They're already widowed. They don't have a husband anymore. It's important for us to respect their privacy, give them their dignity, support them in society, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be helping each other. We're supposed to be supporting each other and uplifting each other, because honestly, whoever is not uplifted is weight. And that weight is pulling all of us down collectively. So if we pick up the person that's down, we're going to go farther, we're going to go higher, and we're going to be stronger.
Wow. MashaAllah. That is very powerful. Very true. And with that, I mean, I think that there's no better note to end this conversation on. I want to thank you guys for being here. We've been here for about an hour now. Thank you so much for being in support of ACC and the Fund Her Future campaign, for being women who have chosen to challenge and to be transformative in a society that definitely needs all of our voices. So, assalamu alaikum, guys.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.